Ghostbusters is a platforming run-and-gun released early into the Sega Genesis life. Generally, games released during the Mega Drive's early years are ignored by the retro gaming community. This might be because games released during this period didn't push the system's graphical and audio capabilities, or maybe just not too many people feel nostalgic over the Genesis pre-Sonic years. And that is a shame too, because while Ghostbusters is not graphically impressive, the gameplay is really fun and addicting. Of note is the fact that this game was developed by Sega, but lists Activision as the original developer, despite being completely different from Activision's 8-bit Ghostbusters game released for the NES, Master System and home computers of the time. Taking place after the events of the first movie, you take control of Peter Venkman, Ray Stantz or Egon Spengler. Winston is mysteriously absent from the game and no mention of him is ever made during any of the cutscenes or the game's manual. Whichever character you choose is the one you'll play for the rest of the game, as you can't cycle between them. Ray is slow but takes less damage, Egon is fast but fragile, and Peter is a balance between the two. Personally, I think the game's level design heavily favors Ray's resilience, in part because there are times when poor enemy placement forces you to take damage. Moreover, things can get pretty hectic in some of the later stages. Being able to take more damage is a clear advantage during the game's many boss fights. On the other hand, most of the platforming here is pretty basic, with the fire level being the only time precision platforming is required. The way I see it, Ray is the best choice, with Egon being a good pick for speedrunners. The game has 6 stages, with the first 4 being playable in any order. The objective of each level is to find and defeat all the mid-bosses and then track down the level's final boss. These are scattered in specific places of each level, and though the missions aren't particularly large, they can be confusing to navigate with lots of one-way doors and passages. Thankfully, you can access a menu which displays a map, allows you to change weapons, or use items like night goggles and food that restores your health. When you find a mid-level boss, you're trapped in a room and have to shoot its weak point to defeat it. No two bosses are the same, and learning their attacks, weak spots, when to attack and which weapon to use is where Ghostbusters really shines. When a mid-boss is defeated, a ghost will escape, which must then be captured with your proton pack. If successfully captured, you regain some health, energy, and gain more money at the end of each mission. If the ghost escapes, no reward will be given. One flaw I did come across with the boss fights is that their patterns are random, making it easy for you to become trapped. For example, this golem has 2 jumping attacks to allow the player to crawl under him and avoid being pinned to the wall. But in this particular fight, he never actually jumped, so I was forced to take damage. After completing a mission, you can visit an item shop to buy food, screen clearing bombs and night vision goggles, which are only really needed for the fire level. You can also visit a weapon shop where you can find new gear, ranging from shields that reduce the damage you take, energy upgrades, and of course new weapons like the spread shot. You earn money by killing enemies, breaking safes, capturing ghosts, and completing missions. If you feel a level is too difficult for you, you can walk back to the shops. This kind of breaks the game though. If you're patient enough, you can grind for money, as all the enemies will respawn by the time you re-enter the level. Personally, I found most weapons to be of limited use and definitely not worth the excessive prices. With that said, some can be very useful against specific enemies, though personally I saved my money for the shield and the energy upgrades. Firing any of the special weapons will also consume energy, though thankfully you can shoot Slimer to restore your health or energy. Ghostbusters really doesn't push the graphical capabilities of the Sega Genesis. The animations are jerky, there isn't any parallax scrolling, and no effects were added during the game's water or fire segments. The enemy design isn't particularly interesting either, with most foes being either slimes or flying everyday objects. The bosses are another story, as they feature interesting designs, and you'll even come across a few familiar faces like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and even a little Shop of Horrors reference in the form of an Audrey Jr. cameo. The music and sound effects are a bit of a mixed bag. Most levels feature catchy tunes, but the game's rendition of the Ghostbusters theme is pretty subpar. Worse still are the sound effects, which can really grate on you after a while. Interestingly, Ghostbusters has a ton of cutscenes, most of which feature a lot of text, complete with English issues, like this Slovenian mystery here. I enjoy a good story in my games, but there isn't anything interesting here. Ironically, even with all this text, we still don't know what happened to Winston, or why is there a castle in the middle of New York. Perhaps that is the true Slovenian mystery. It's possible that Sega at one point intended to add RPG or adventure elements to the game, but eventually scaled back on this idea. Whatever their intentions were, all of the text and cutscenes could have easily been cut out, as they only served to break the game's flow. Overall, Ghostbusters for the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive is a pretty fun game. The graphics and audio may not be the best, and at times the level design needs a bit of polishing, but exploring the levels, shooting enemies, and especially fighting and capturing bosses is a ton of fun. Sadly, the game is getting a little pricey these days, but if you can track down a cheap copy, I highly recommend it.